Welcome to the CMO Spotlight. And today I'd like to welcome Lindsay Listanski, who is the Vice President of National Public Relations and Communications for Coldwell Banker. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you, Joe. So good to be here.
Thank you for being with me. I'm really excited to talk to you today. And so I wondered if we could just start the conversation with, I know you've been with Coldwell Banker since 2011, so for quite a while, but you actually did a little hiatus working for a different group within the parent company. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about Coldwell Banker as an organization, and then I want to hear about that career path a little.
Sure. No, I'm happy to. So Coldwell Banker is a company that is in real estate, and we have been around since 1906. So we have been around a very, very long time. And we serve residential, commercial, and luxury real estate services. So we are a global company, and we have almost 100,000 agents around the globe, which is incredible. So our size and our scale is tremendous. And we actually roll up under Realogy as our holding company, which also has really great brands like Sotheby's and Corcoran, Century 21, ERA, Better Homes and Gardens, and so on. So we're really industry-leading powerhouse group of real estate companies. So I did join Coldwell Banker in 2011 officially. However, I was actually born into this brand. So both of my parents have been with Coldwell Banker. My dad is a broker and my mom is an agent my entire life.
Wow.
Some kids are like born with a basketball in their hand and they become.
Yeah, it was in your blood.
I had like my own business card when I was 2 and was like,
wow.
Coldwell Banker. So officially 2011, but I've been part of this brand forever. So I bleed blue. And yes, I started as the social media manager, the first ever social media manager. I remember doing an intern in college internship and saying like, there's something to being able to use, Facebook for business. And that was before business pages even came out. So it was really cool to be kind of coming up as a digital native and being able to jump into using it for business as kind of one of the first people out of college to do that. And from there, I grew into running all of our national advertising. And at that point, it was probably maybe 4 or 5 years into the company. And I was wanting more. And the great thing about Coldwell Banker, again, as I alluded to, is we're part of Realogy, which has a lot of different career opportunities. And people that, are on an accelerated career path really can look at our company as not a corporate ladder, but as a corporate lattice. You can look to your competitors as sister brands. And at that point, our senior leadership team said, we're thinking about launching another franchise. We want you to run marketing for that. So I left Coldwell Banker for a little bit to work on that. And then from there, they had another tour of duty, which is what they were calling it, to grow my skill set. And they said, we want to have you work on our iBuyer program. So I did that, rounded out more marketing skill sets, and then came back recently as the Vice President of Public Relations and Communications. So it's been a really amazing ride. And I just love being part of this really massive brand that has unlimited career opportunities.
That's awesome. And it's fun to hear that you sort of grew up around the brand and in the brand. And
definitely.
So who better to lead the communications efforts than somebody that truly knows Coldwell Banker maybe better than anybody.
Yeah. And it's, it's so important because at the end of the day, everything we do is for our agents. So being able to grow up understanding what it's like to go to a listing appointment, to wake up and have to hustle every day, to not have a guaranteed paycheck, like all of those things, it's great to have as kind of in the back of my mind of, at the end of the day, that's who we care about. And everything we're doing is so that our agents can best serve their clients around the country.
I love that. I love that. So talk a little bit about your role as national PR and communications. What kinds of things are you responsible for? And tell me a little bit just about the organization.
Sure.
Do you have a team?
Yes, I have a massive, very, very talented team of communicators. So I oversee 3 verticals. I have communications internally. I have external, all of PR, and then I also have the social media team on the company-owned side of the business. So Coldwell Banker is actually split into 2 sides of business. We have a franchise, our affiliates, and then we have company-owned, and I oversee both for residential, luxury, and commercial. And then we also have 2 agencies of record who are just phenomenal partners. So we have G&S Business Communications and Keurig and Weiss on our commercial side.
And what kind of things do they do? Like the 2 different agencies, they do one's solely focus on analyst, relations?
Yeah, so Keurig and Weiss, they're just new with us as of this year, and they've done a really, really great job for us. They're focused on our commercial side of the business. And then G&S Business Communications, they were formerly Cooper Katz. They've been our partner for over a decade, I think almost 15 years at this point. They focus on our residential. And they're really focused on some of those like bigger paid opportunities and, you know, the national scale pitching for our C-suite, things like that.
Got it. Great, great, great. So I'm curious if you either got a piece of advice earlier in your career that really stuck with you, or if there's a piece of advice that you like to give people that are just starting out in a communications career. So I'm a new college grad with my shiny new PR or communications degree. What advice do you give folks like that?
I'm a huge, huge believer in mentorship. So I think I can attribute at least 50% of my success truly to my mentors. I feel like I got really, really lucky with aligning myself with people who were very generous in their advice, but they were also people who could give me tough love and to be really, really open and honest with where I'm strong, but also where are my shortcomings. I was a 3-sport athlete my whole life, and playing sports, I feel like the coaches that were really the standouts were the ones that knew when to push you in real time after a game. And I feel like I had those mentors that are really good at that on the spot feedback. You know, I'm going to let her like cool down from a day, give it tomorrow. But I've gotten really lucky. So I think people that are just breaking into a new company, they should really look to find great mentors within their company, but also outside of their company as well. And, you know, you can do that through LinkedIn, go to conferences. There's a million young professional groups. In our case, within Realogy, I founded something called Next Gen Employee Resource Group, which is literally built for that. It's up and coming young stars within the company and making sure that they have all the resources they need to grow in their career.
I love that. You answered my follow-on question, which was sort of like, how do you find the right mentor? Where do you begin? Because often young people are like, I'd love to get a mentor, but I don't know where to begin. But
and it's such a compliment too. I mean, if someone comes and they ask me to I'm like, oh my God, but people are nervous, right? They're like, oh, I see you're so busy, you don't have time. And I'm like, no, are you kidding me? Like, I live for this. And I know you like to ask people like, what's your favorite quote? And for me, it's lift as you rise. The higher I get in my career, the more people I want to bring with me. And I feel like, you know, I love the opportunity to give back to someone. And I also look at it as an opportunity always for reverse mentorship. Whoever's coming in fresh out of college knows a lot more than I do about things that are, you know, just being taught. So I always see it as a mutual benefit. And as much as I'm trying to talk to them, I'm listening just as much.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I think sometimes young people can be intimidated, and even potential mentors can be intimidated if you just say, will you be my mentor? It doesn't have to begin with that. It begins with will you have coffee with me to give me some advice? And then if that goes well, let's schedule another one. Let's schedule another one. And it becomes more of a mentor relationship, but it doesn't have to begin with a formal, like, will you be my mentor?
Totally. The one advice though I would give people is the strongest mentor relationships I've had are when people are really specific about what they're trying to get out of this. Not let me pick your brain on, you know, what you've done. It's like specifically, what do you be self-aware? What do you really need to work on? Is it your confidence, communication? Is it your hard skills, your soft skills? Like going in and being self-aware and really intentional about what you want to get out of it has always created the strongest relationships. And we both, you know, get the most out of it.
I love that. So that segues nicely to my next question, which I believe that everybody has a superpower of some kind. And some people are more aware of what their superpower is than others, but I'm curious if you have a superpower, and if so, what is it?
Oh, I guess I have a superpower. I would say my superpower, and you know, this I guess served me well in my position now, has probably always been just I'm a really strong communicator. And when I was in 8th grade, I got told that I was aggressively friendly as the social butterfly of the class. But I was like, you know what, 8th grade friends, now I run communications, and I flipped it into a career. So I think my communication skills have served me really well in making sure that I've always advocated for myself in my career, advocated for people on my team. And it's, you know, served me well in crisis communication situations and things like that. So I would definitely say that's the gift of gab, I guess.
But I love that phrase. You were aggressively friendly.
Aggressively friendly. I was like, I don't know how to take that, but like, you're not wrong. I know what you mean.
This is an aside, and maybe we'll cut this out in editing. But in high school, my advisor told me that I was most likely in his advisee group to become a game show host.
Really?
And I don't think he meant it as a compliment.
I love that.
And but so many years, I went back for my 25th high school reunion, and I saw that same teacher that had told me that. And I told him that I had fulfilled the promise and I was in fact a game show host now. And he's like, I think he looked at me kind of confused and didn't remember ever saying that.
Right, like I said that? Yeah, you said
Yeah,
that.
but some days I'm kind of like a game show host.
Yeah, totally. We have a Gen Blue conference. It's our annual conference every year. And I actually got to host a game show on stage in front of like 10,000 people, which was super fun. I was like, I love doing this. I would do this all the time if I could. So
That's amazing. I love it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, we are hopefully on our way through the end of a pandemic. And by the time this airs, hopefully we'll be even further through it.
Yes.
But I'm curious, other than specifically the pandemic, what's the biggest challenge that you're facing in your role as a communications professional?
Listen, communications is such an individual thing, right? Everybody likes to learn and listen and take in information in their own way. Some people like to listen to information, they read it. Some people like it on the go. Some people like videos. So I think always striking the right balance of how our audience wants to take that information in has been a challenge, right? And we know that nobody wants another email. So finding that right, like multimedia mix of getting our message out has certainly been a struggle, but I think we've come leaps and bounds in making sure that our network is very up to date and gets succinct messaging. The pandemic has certainly been, a struggle within our industry, especially in the beginning where people were like afraid to leave their houses, right? And we were saying our agents were kind of like up in that heroes world where they were kind of going out every day saying people need to move. And that's just a fact of life. There's always going to be a need to relocate and move because of lifestyle triggers. And our agents, were out there doing what they needed to do. So it was really interesting to watch them and to be able to support them and to keep them as safe and informed as possible, through our communications team. We had our team meeting every single night till 10 o'clock, figuring out what was tomorrow going to look like in terms of mandates and state by state, what we had to do to keep everyone protected and safe. So that was certainly a challenge and my team really excelled.
That's great. So I'm curious where you find inspiration either for yourself or for your team that you work with.
I'm so inspired by our senior leadership team. I have to say, like, our CEO is Ryan Gorman, and Ryan Gorman to me is one of the most inspirational leaders. He is a servant leader. He has such a strong moral compass, and he leads, he's not led. And I am constantly inspired by the way that he has been driving things for our brand for the past few years. So I would say Ryan is a huge inspiration to me. He moves fast, he takes chances, but he's just incredibly smart and has one of the biggest hearts I've ever seen.
Okay, so I'm going to flip it on you and say, where outside of the company do you find inspiration? And maybe outside of your family too.
Yeah, one of the groups that I really love is from, are you familiar with Barstool Sports?
Yeah. The publisher, right?
Yep. So they're a giant media company. Eric Nardini is their CEO. So everyone thinks, Barstool Sports is like a bro house, right? Like the fact that they have a woman CEO is really interesting. But Erica has a group of young, talented people on Facebook that it's a networking Facebook group. And I get a lot of inspiration from there because it's across all different industries, all different demographics and types of people. So I get a lot of inspiration from that group. It's a really good one.
Nice. So I'm curious.
Token CEO, if anybody wants to look at it.
Token CEO?
Token CEO, yes.
Nice. I like that.
I think she's great.
So I'm curious, are there certain values that you want to demonstrate as a leader or that you demand from your team?
Yeah, that's a great question. We actually just had our employee engagement survey where you kind of get like judged on all of that. So are you a good communicator? Is there transparency? Do people feel like, they can speak up and be honest with their opinion? So I, for my team, demand transparency and honesty and respect. And we are like a no drama team, which is so nice because I can't stand drama. As a leader, I believe so strongly in transparency, not just in, business goals and objectives, but really making sure from a coaching perspective, people always know where they stand. I think that's really important. And I think like feedback is a gift and I try to give it to people every single day. As a leader, I want people to feel like there is a very flat organization in our company. And I make it really clear that if you're in a meeting, you're there for a reason. And while you may be in the room with Ryan Gorman, who's our CEO, or David Marine, who's our CMO, you're in that meeting because you are smart and I want you to give your opinion. Even if it's challenging the status quo, you're in there for a reason and I expect you to speak up and, to really share your thoughts. My biggest pet peeve is when people are in a room and they don't speak, whether it's in the chat or in a meeting. So I really encourage people to use their voice, especially entry level. Like I see people sit and I'm like, you were in a meeting for 30 minutes and you didn't say anything. Like you had to have had thoughts. So that's something that I'm really always working with my team on.
Well, either they're entry level or they're painfully introverted.
Right. Which as communicators is kind of an oxymoron, but I see, people coming from college and they're like, oh, you want me to speak in that meeting? I'm like, absolutely. This is
right.
Everyone has an opinion and like yours is valued. So I feel like making sure my team knows their opinion is super, super valued is, something that's fostered a really nice environment for my team.
Love that. So I want to shift gears a little bit. As you know, we're marketing matchmakers, and that often means we connect brands and marketing agencies together. And so we don't fit squarely. We're not an agency. We're not on the client side. We're somewhere in between. So we think a lot about that relationship between agency and client. I'm curious if there are certain functions within your team. You mentioned a couple of agencies that you work with. Are there certain functions that you absolutely would never outsource outside of the company? Or are there certain other disciplines that you would always want to get external perspective and always outsource?
Yeah, well, the past year has been chock full of crisis communications.
Yeah, true.
Like we would never outsource a crisis communication. We would get counsel from our agencies on their opinion, but that's something that we are very much handle in-house because we have to work with legal and we just know our business, better than an agency would. So I would say that would be something that we wouldn't really outsource ever. Something that we do outsource, that's a good question. There's not like a hard line between like outsourcing and not. I just feel like with our agencies, we're so collaborative that they feel like a true extension of our team. I wouldn't say there's 100% something that we outsource. Things like copywriting, certainly we kick to our agencies to help with just when we're, a little bit underwater. But I would say the biggest takeaway is we're not outsourcing anything with crisis comms.
I love it. So communications, you pointed out at the beginning of the conversation that it can be, everybody wants to receive it in their own mode and
Totally.
in their own way. I'm curious, as a communications leader within the company, how do you show the value of communications to the non-marketing, non-communications people on the team that maybe don't fully understand what goes into what you do every day?
Totally. And when I came in as the new leader of this department, that was something that I said to the team. I said, you guys are world-class industry leading communicators, but I don't think people know how good you are. Like, it's just, oh yeah, we got another media hit. Like, that's great. So I am a data junkie and I've really worked with my team on putting together some really great dashboards to showcase not only the success that we get, but like what that means from a business perspective. So, for example, this year, our PR team has averaged, say 50 media hits a day. So like, that's cool. But like, if you had to spend money on that earned media, what does that equate to? It's like $45 million. So when you put it into something like that ability to have that business acumen of like, what are our goals? What would be the cost savings or what is the value of this? That's been really helpful to everyone from our C-suite down to agents. They're like, okay, I get it. I get the value that you're giving us. And we also break a lot of our work into, where is our attention going to? So is it agent focused? Is it building brand awareness? So just creating those visual charts of what we're doing has been incredibly helpful. Of course, we're still giving communications benchmarks like open rate and click through, but I feel like those real tangible, like cost savings, efficiency, process improvements, that has been something that has really enabled people to see just how good the team is.
I love that. And I guess on the flip side, you could do kind of an opposite calculation to say, hey, we were able to mitigate some crisis situation that would have been really costly for us.
Absolutely. And I say that to our brokers all the time when we're talking about our value prop. I said, listen, we're really good at keeping you in the news, but we're also really good when we need to keep you out of the news too. We're not going to do that, but walking them through case studies saying, listen, here's what happened. Here's why you didn't hear about it, because our team did all these things behind the scenes. And because of our size and scale, we have such tremendous partnerships with reporters across, the country that have, a lot of trust in us. So that when it comes time for franchise sales, especially, has come into play as something really valuable. That if you were, out in Kearney, Nebraska, like you're not going to know how to navigate something like this.
Right.
If you're busy recruiting and retaining and growing your company, like leave the PR to us. We'll handle that for you.
That's great. So I'm curious if there's a campaign or program that taught you something incredibly valuable, either because it was a huge flop and you learned a valuable lesson that you really needed to learn, or it was a huge success and you were able to celebrate that and then try to replicate it.
Yeah, I would have to say last year, and I can't take credit for this because I was on maternity leave, so I had twins last February. But going into 2022 planning, we had this amazing campaign all around the value of being home. And if there was ever a year of like being home, it was last year. Like just funny coincidence that where this was the year where you spent more time home than ever. But one thing that I'll say about Coldwell Banker is we're very true to our roots of like who we are, what we believe in. Home is our core. So we launched this amazing TV campaign for a couple weeks. The pandemic stopped, but because of the message that we use, we were able to flip it into something called Hometown Heroes, where we started spotlighting all the hometown heroes across the country that were keeping things running, the truck drivers, the nurses, the doctors, the first responders. And that campaign to me was so interesting how we were able to pivot in real time, stay true to our roots. And from a marketing perspective, I just felt like it was a grand slam watching our team in real time be really agile with what we had and still staying true to our message, but being able to make it work for the remainder of the year.
Well, and so it sounds like you actually were planning that campaign pre-COVID,
Totally.
pandemic, and then you had to pivot it a little to make it work. The message still
Correct.
works, but that's really fortuitous because we also have had conversations with CMOs and marketing leaders who had the exact opposite, where they had these grand plans for something that they had to completely scrap and throw away because they were planning some grand event or something in person, where they're planning some, yeah.
We're lucky too. I mean, David Marine has been our CMO for quite some time. He is an industry visionary. We also work with Siltonen and Partners out of California, and Rob Siltonen is also a genius. So we have really smart people who are quick on the fly, and it's served us really well. We're very lucky.
Great. All right, so I'm going to shift gears to some really fun questions that have nothing to do with anything we've talked about before.
Okay.
That you already shared a quote that you really love. I'm curious if there's also a book or a movie or a sports team or a band that inspires you.
Tom Brady inspires me. So like you could say I'm a front runner. I was, a Patriots fan, now I'm a Bucks fan, but he just to me like epitomizes excellence. And I feel like he has given everything in his life from, his time, his diet, everything mentally. But he is to me such an inspiration as a leader, as a teammate. You see the way that he knows how to speak to different teammates, like the way he speaks to Gronk versus someone else, like very, very different. But like
he just grunts at Gronk, but then
right, exactly, right. Like, but he finds that common ground with people. And to me, like again, I'm a sports nut. I am so inspired by the way that he leads and just is always chasing excellence. And even at the top of his game, he never seems satisfied. So even when you're, number one out of however many people, in your field, like he's just never going to settle. And I am so inspired by that. I love that.
I love it. Okay. So you mentioned that you have the twins and then I know you have an older son as well. So you have three boys.
Yes.
So I'm outside of your family, I'm curious where you find joy, outside of the family.
So I have gotten really into Peloton, which is a brand that absolutely inspires me. I think Peloton is like one of the most genius brands. They have such great authenticity and diversity with their instructors. They're so tapped into like entertainment with music, which I think is really cool. But Peloton has been a mental lifesaver for me in a pandemic year where I can just run down to my basement, get a quick workout, connect with all these different instructors and, stay sane in a crazy time. So for me, like my Peloton has given me tremendous joy.
That's great. Well, that also speaks to another question that I often ask about if there's a brand that really inspires you. And it sounds like Peloton is.
They're great. I mean, they let their instructors be who they are. They're not censored. There's something for everyone, whether it's the person that's teaching you, the music you're connecting with. They've tapped into social media where you're following these instructors and you feel like they're part of their lives. They have their apparel. It's like this cult-like brand. And I totally get it. I understand why people love it so much and how it becomes such a crucial part of their life. So I think what they've done in the fitness industry has been absolutely incredible to watch.
As a marketer, I can tell you, I really appreciate that 360 approach that you talked about it's the apparel, it's the personalities of the instructors, it's the actual physical product, it's the advertising, it's all of it together that I think makes them compelling in terms of a case study of
Totally.
You build fandom.
And the other case study that I don't think people talk enough about is their perception, their first couple of years of business versus now. Like Peloton has become very mainstream. That bike is super expensive. And it is an absolute luxury to have one in your home or to be able to go to a gym and to borrow one or have the membership that's expensive every month. And, you know, in the beginning, it was like, oh, that's really snooty. And you would see the commercials where someone would be working out in their like, you know, 20,000 square foot house in LA. And you're like, yeah, that's totally relatable.
A dedicated Peloton, beautiful room.
Like yes, I have a Peloton.
We're looking at the cliffs of Maui or something.
Exactly. Like I'm looking at a cement wall in my I'm riding. Like that is not what I'm seeing out of this beautiful floor to ceiling window. But they have pivoted in their marketing big time. And I don't think people, maybe subliminally, they don't realize, but like I noticed that right away. Like there was this shift in the way that they marketed themselves. And I was like, this is why their sales are through the roof. Like they've totally gotten away from that like ultra luxury to, you know, people that weren't like 120 pounds on the bike. Like you're starting to see people that look like you or, you know, their homes look a little bit more like yours. And it was really smart. I think it was genius.
I love it. Well, I think part of their win has been to democratize the message so that while it is a really expensive, quote, luxury purchase, it is aspirational and attainable by maybe a wider variety of people than what they first.
Totally. I think their target market completely changed 100%, which has been hugely beneficial for them.
So, okay. So I have one last question for you, which is just as part of these conversations, is there something that I should be asking that I haven't asked you that you'd like to see me ask in the future?
I think right now, you know, we are in the middle of like the great resignation, right? We're all talking about work from home, life from home, and especially like working parents, right? Like, I think it's so interesting thinking about where people are in their careers and how they're finding that work-life balance. And, you know, because of this shift, has it made you think differently about your position or where you live or how you attack your business plan? But I think there's just this huge shift in how we perceive, you know, our lives as a whole versus like work and life. And I think into that might be really interesting for your audience to hear about.
I love that. Well, the flip side of the great resignation is what I keep hearing on the other side is the talent wars, you know.
Totally. Oh my goodness. We're interviewing right now for people. And one woman, I don't know why she said this, but she's like, honestly, the only reason I really, really want this job is because I could work from home. And I was like, not the best way to start an interview. Right. I get it. And like, talent feels empowered to be able to be that transparent and say like, listen, I want a remote, and this is the new normal, and this is what I want, and this is what attracted me to this position. Not the best way to word it. As a communicator, I could think of like 100 different ways she could have positioned that, but it's true. And like this talent war and the talent empowerment, it's been so interesting to see it.
I love it. Well, I mean, I love it from a sociology perspective and watching.
For sure,
it.
right?
I don't love it. Right. It's just been fascinating. Lindsay Listanski is the Vice President of Communications and National PR for Coldwell Banker. Thank you so much for this time, Lindsay. It's been a fantastic conversation.
Oh my gosh, Joe, I had so much fun with you. It was great. Thank you.